And there we go, guys. I'm going to be jumping right back off because you guys are the ones that everybody wants to talk to. So anybody has questions, make sure you get them into the chat and we'll try to get them all up before the end of the show. Have fun, guys.
Thanks, Ken.
Thanks, Ken.
What's up, Av?
Oh, not much. Just another gorgeous day out here in Nova Scotia, Canada. Yeah, how are things for you?
Oh, no complaints. It's another beautiful day, and I think that might be a great way to start the show by each of us sharing what we've been doing the last week, and then let it chop out from there. So why don't you go ahead and tell me what you've been up to, and then I will follow suit.
Yeah. It's always an interesting time within the cannabis industry in Canada. I know Health Canada is out there doing lots of inspections. So many of the clients that I'm working for are just getting ready, preparing for these Health Canada inspections. I do a lot of work with with the Nova Scotia Community College teaching cannabis cultivation. So yesterday I had the whole class over. They did some sensory evaluation around some hemp. I think there was a little THC cannabis that was consumed as well. Very, great opportunity for them to be able to get, some interest around understanding sensory evaluation, getting them to better understand their own nose and being able to taste differences, look at everything from ash color to the oil ring to just trichome density, and hopefully we'll get into more discussions around some of that and seeing how the soil can play a big role in that. Had the opportunity, got time to do a little reading as well. Interesting paper that's looking at variations of cannabinoid and terpene profiles between indoor and outdoor. So yeah, it's one thing about this whole industry is that it's always changing, and that's why I love about this intro and the way Ken has displayed it. Just shows the dynamism within the industry and within in large part the cannabis plant and plants in general. So
fantastic.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you for sharing. And I've had the pleasure of finally getting to get back to work up at the compost yard. We had quite a washout from starting in just before Christmas through middle of this month, which was great. We really needed the water. The second round of storms really seemed to penetrate the soil. There wasn't as much runoff and flooding, which was great. Again, it goes back to that storage, the battery storage of the soil itself that will provide that water later on in the year through the mycorrhizae networks. So then we started the muncher back up. So that was a gentleman, which I don't think you met yet, Gary from the Eco Sciences. He'll be on the show coming up discussing what we actually did. So they brought this machine up here in early December, and it's basically a system for digesting food waste. And the interesting thing about this process is called aerobic digestion, not anaerobic. And personally, I didn't think that it was possible. And Gary came on the show, I think with Ken, and I tried to poke holes at him, and I couldn't. Like everything I asked him, he came back with the correct answer. And then at the end of the show, I asked him, who invented this thing? I got to talk to this guy. And lo and behold, I talked to Mo, and I explained to him who I was and what I've been doing. And I said, hey, when can I see this piece of equipment? And he said, we can bring it to you and showcase it. I'm like, okay, all right, let me reach out to Rob, the owner of Peach Hill Soils, and let me see if we can set it up there. And, first of all, they gave me the keys to the place, which I think they were insane, like letting me loose without any parental supervision in a 26-yard compost facility with all the equipment and supplies and materials to play with, right? So Rob was okay with it. We brought it down. We did a run. And then I took the product and used it in a variety of different tests. and the results were absolutely amazing. And at some point in the future, we'll be, sharing those the returns of the test data and what it means, doing some interpretation on it. But I'm very, very excited in the essence that the end result of this is providing a very, very nutrient dense bacteria. So the nutrient isn't mobile. Traditional synthetics and organic nutrients, for the most part, pretty much mobile in the soil. So you get a heavy rain, you lose them. Where this is now, the biology is the fertilizer. And so basically what happened was the bacteria consumed pretty much all the nutrient value in the material. And again, it comes out in a liquid form that is very easily applied. And it's way more valuable than anaerobic digestion, because in anaerobic digestion, you're actually gassing off all the nitrogen in ammonia and methane forms, and then using that to burn as a gas source. And then you get this coffee grounds humate that comes out the other end. Now, the humate has a little value. It's not bad, but I don't see that as being a super positive way of utilizing this incredibly valuable resource. We don't need to burn more gases. We've got plenty of those, but we do need more, biological nutrient that will increase food density, nutritional density. So
you're really getting aerobic liquid.
Aerobic
liquid. And what's the time process?
So it takes him about 2 days to get the bacterial biomass high enough to really start the digestion process. Once the bed is fully reactive, it takes, I think they can do, it's a lot. I think this machine will do like 3 or 4 tons a day. So that's a lot of material. That's a lot of liquid.
Yeah. Amazing.
I think it's up to 100 tons a day for the big machine that they were talking about, Leighton.
Yes, they have. I believe they can tandem them, daisy chain them in a way that, yes, you can produce just an insane amount of nutrient. So again, a really, really exciting technology that I'm looking forward to playing with more and really, really understanding.
Wow, that seems like an absolute game changer.
Yeah, it is. And ironically, I was developing a hydraulic pitchfork for turning compost or blending compost materials. Okay. And inside so just imagine a fork truck, right? With a fork with 2 prongs on it. I actually have 4. And I welded on, or had Mo weld on these channel. So it's basically angle iron on top of them, so I can stab the pile and lift up. Yep. Traditionally, the way compost is turned now is, they usually either use a loader, which they scoop and then they move over, drop, scoop, move over, drop, which is a tremendous amount of work. It takes a lot of time, burns a ton of diesel. So the concept was you can use this, turn it in place. You don't move the pile. You just open it up and expose it to air, release the heat so that you don't end up causing a fire. So the owner of Peach Hill was like, "Oh my God, why hasn't anybody else thought of this?" And I'm like, "I don't know." So yeah, there's going to be tubes inside the angle iron for me to put biology into the soil, into the compost as I blend it to start. But then now we can use his material in that same delivery method to all of the compost piles that are at Peach Hill. So it's an exciting time. I mean, again, the universe lines the planets up, and we just got to pay attention and do what comes naturally.
Right. Wow.
So exciting times.
Yeah, that is such a game changer in terms. So when you were poking holes, were you also asking about what type of diversity you're getting in the microbial populations? Are we, is this something that would be considered organic certified, because you may not be reaching those temperatures, turning them over 3 times and so on and so forth, or?
Right. So that's the interesting thing. This is definitely in the gray. So I don't know where that is going to end up going. I know, like, I tried to run an experiment at the local Rodale branch here in Ventura.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, because they are certified organic, nothing inorganic can go onto the site. So I'm like, well, I can never prove that it's organic or inorganic, because I would assume that you would have to start with, okay, was the produce organic that you put in there to make this product, right? So can't answer that, because we really don't know where these fruits and vegetables are being produced and whether or not that sticker on them is legitimate or not. So, and then you have what he uses to break down the food is a suite of different types of bacteria
Mm-hmm.
that he orders. So he has a company that he works with that provide biology for different industry, medical research, etc. So it's a legit firm, and they have a tremendous and very wide, diverse panel of organisms that they sell to these different industries for their research or work. So he basically has a menu of different bacterial species that he can pick from. And so he'll often tailor the recipe that he uses as a starter based on what he's actually going to be digesting.
Exactly.
So this is super adjustable. So he's been working on this for 12 years. So this is no joke. And they finally last year got all their patents, all their business filings, everything that they needed to do to be able to operate. So it's kind of like now it's time. Now it's go time. Now they can really start experimenting and trying different things and techniques. So again, it's a very exciting time. But those are great questions. And to be honest with you, it leads into another conversation about cleaning up existing soils.
Well, exactly. Yeah.
And so, interestingly enough, Poe and I have been doing nose work for 1.5 years now. Okay. What nose work is where you use your dog to find certain smells, and you go through a training process where you learn to handle the dog and read the dog's reactions, because obviously you can't talk to them. So we finally got to a point where I'm comfortable handling them, although I'm going to continue to do the nose work that I'm doing. But we started working last week with a really nationally recognized handler not too far from here. What she does is she has 2 different dogs that sniff out fungi. Right. She's got 2 dogs that sniff out endangered bats. She's got another 2 dogs that sniff out endangered turtles. So she's hired by, wind farms, you name the different organizations, from conservatives, land conservation, wildlife groups, nonprofits, and she gets sent out into the field to, figure out if anything that's going to happen to that area is going to be detrimental to these species of animals, or in the case of the fungi is actually like a pathogen. And so she's trying to identify it so it doesn't spread to the other areas of the farm.
Right.
So again, she's going to be training me and him in what would be called defining ecotones. So an ecotone is basically, imagine a riparian system next to a field, a meadow. So somewhere in between the riparian system and the meadow is what's called the ecotone. So there's less water-loving plants and more soil-loving plants. So that's a line. So Poe is going to be sniffing out parts per million of toxins to determine where the EPA says is safe for human activity and where it needs to be treated. Mm-hmm. Now, this is going to save billions of dollars for the taxpayers, because right now you have to test every foot on a grid pattern to really get that type of ecotone. So where do you start treating? And he can do it in a matter of an hour or 2, right? And no testing. So it's I'm really getting excited about that, because I've also been invited to start working with Rocketdyne. So Rocketdyne was the top secret military facility that Boeing, NASA, and a lot of their crazy other sub partners did a lot of testing. As a matter of fact, that site had the Apollo rocket tested there. They actually had the first nuclear power plant. It unfortunately melted down in '58, but so this site is rather a thorn in the sides of humanity in the area because of the level of toxicity that exists there. But there's 2,000 or 3,000 acres on the top of a mountain. There's the wildlife up there is incredible because everybody's been kept out for so long. And so now they want to basically give the land back to the residences of California. But unfortunately, they have to do all the cleanup prior to turning the land loose. And something really interesting about this site is that there's a very unique area or valley where the local indigenous would come together, 3 different tribes, to celebrate the winter solstice because there's a rock that allows the light to shine into this cave in a very, very unique way. And inside the cave are all these paintings that have been there for, I think it was carbon dated 3,000 years old.
Okay.
So it's a very, very spiritual and religious place was for the indigenous. And I believe from what I was told on the history that the last of the people were forced out of there in the 20s by the ranchers. And then, you know, NASA and Boeing came in there, realized, oh my God, this is the perfect site. You know, we own the only road up there, so no one can sneak in and out. So it's highly secured. If we fuck up and blow something up, we're far enough away from people that we're not going to hurt anybody. And so they took this facility over, and that protected this area, right? If they hadn't taken this over and done all those horrible things up there, first of all, mankind wouldn't have advanced in a lot of ways. But also that Native American site would not have been preserved, would not have been protected. So who knows what would have happened to it if,
you know, and I kind of hope that they would have done some other work over the time as well, right? Wouldn't it'd be amazing to be able to get in there, and even now to get in there and look at the microbial species that are there. If there's a difference in them, unique populations. You know, these adverse events can lead to just understanding a lot more about what's happening underneath, and yeah, it's kind of a gold mine of how nature might choose to reveal itself.
Totally gold mine, and better yet, this is the beginning of a wildlife corridor that travels from that mountain all the way down through Malibu into the Santa Monica Mountains. And I'm on the bridge project. I don't know if you knew this. There's the largest wildlife bridge ever constructed happens on the 101. And so I get to work at the top to clean up the mess that's going to flow all the way down into that corridor and over that bridge. How fucking lucky am I?
Phenomenal.
Yeah. So
you know, even going back, I know that in Canada we typically there are some farmers who are using dogs to sniff out clubroot in canola. So primarily in the prairies where they're growing some of those brassica species, and can be quite prone to this particular fungi. So it's working. I know that there was some interest in looking for powdery mildew and botrytis in cannabis and outdoor grows. So perhaps that's being done elsewhere. I don't think it got off the ground here in Canada, but I know that they are using dogs to sniff out more than just truffles.
Oh God, yes. You know, again, she's doing turtles, bats, eagles, fungi, and it's basically, it's kind of like where we were about 10 years ago. Like when I started talking to people about soil microbes, they thought I had 3 fucking heads. Like what the fuck are you talking? Soil's dirt. It's dirt, right? No, it's the foundation of all life. And so she, in many ways, you know, we laughed about this at our last week about the fact that, people think she's crazy. Like, this lunacy to trust a dog to actually identify things that we can't.
Right.
We can't sniff it out of the air. And so there's a lot of pushback in the industry. But as she becomes more and more successful and is relied on more and more by more organizations that are needing this type of service, she started to finally get some traction. So I think that in the next 10 years, this will become way more normal, kind of like, search and rescue dogs are. I mean, search and rescue dogs have been normalized for a long time now. But now we're kind of going outside the box of, we're trying to find a human or remains of a human, or we're trying to identify microbes or, fungi or these turtles that nest that no human can find. There's no way you're going to find that turtle nest. It's a little tiny nest, and that turtle does a really good job of protecting it from the predators. So, again, way outside the box, but I agree with you that, there's nothing the dog cannot be trained to find. I mean, they have dogs that will find bodies underwater, right? How does that work? Like, I did nose training with him in the pouring rain. I did not believe he could do this shit. The lady would bury the scent underneath a puddle and he would find it. All the dogs find it. So there's a lot more to their nose than we give it credit for sure.
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah, it is. So, again, the wonderful time to be alive and moving forward and having access to all these different tools and technologies that just weren't available very long ago. And I think that this type of concept is going to be huge in what we're talking about. What this whole show's purpose is like, what are the different ways, natural ways we can utilize waste streams to support our health and moving forward, whether it's cannabis or food for animals. It's all important.
Yeah, and I think just to reiterate, just the concept of the show, and I love Ken's simplicity. However you grow, whatever you grow, that however you grow is so respectful to the fact that nature is so robust and so diverse and so redundant, right? So, we don't have to beat down and say that if you're not farming in this manner, you're not going to hit the optimal yields. You're not going to hit the optimal quality, because we know that there are people who are reaching phenomenal yield and quality growing in many different ways. And so the nature is responsive enough and has evolved enough to say that if you want to farm in this manner, using fermented plant extracts and using EM as a product, very different than if you're using aerobic compost teas, and if you're using other organic soil amendments and things like that. Very, very different, yet both can create an incredibly high quality product. What does that say about nature? Nature can respond to this set of microorganisms or that set of microorganisms, and still produce quality. So, speaking just to the fact that, it's incredible. We're not going to necessarily come out with strong answers on anything, because it's always evolving and we're always learning. So,
I think that's a beautifully put. And I love what Ken did too. Just grow at the end, right? But just grow, does that mean grow spiritually, grow emotionally, grow plants? What does that mean? It means everything. Just grow. Just don't be stuck in your rut. Go forward, make changes, accomplish things. So again, big kudos to Ken for this. I love the whole theme and everything else. Although I'm a fucking kid in the picture.
Oh, Leighton, you're just a baby.
hit, baby. I look a little squarish, more squarish than I am.
That's okay, Av. I was thinking of seeing if I could find a picture of one of those little pen protectors, you know, to put it.
Oh.
Sorry, I just had to, okay?
Yeah, can you Photoshop some Ray-Bans on me?
Yeah, there you go. But speaking on what you just said, yes, NASA did a study on aquaculture facilities, I'm pretty sure worldwide. And their goal was to identify a pattern in the biology that supported this aquatic life, figuring that there would probably be 10 or 12 main species that were found in every single different system. Well, it turns out that that was not the fact, that every single system had its completely unique ecology, to a point where the only one that had anything similar was an aquaponics facility that was across the street from an aquaculture facility. They were neighbors, and that facilities had, I think, a couple species of bacteria that were so. That was it. So, yeah. So nature is so diverse that I don't think we'll ever have a true answer to all of the questions of like, oh, well, what is a better technique or better method? I think it's just so unique that you don't have to focus on that. But more importantly, what might be right is that we focus on what's in situ in our area. So what's here, and focus on that, and then use the diversity of all the different things that we're going to speak about. There's so many different techniques: jadam, natural farming, biodynamics, on and on and on. Soil food web. There's unlimited resources, and I think that's the greatest strength in what we're trying to do here, is that we're trying to give the audience and people that listen the comfort, or I think it's confidence, the confidence that they can try these things and they're not going to waste their time.
Yeah.
You know,
and really reaffirming that, whether it's intuition or whether it's having more trust in nature, and reminding ourselves once again, of course, we are part of nature. We're not separate from nature, but having that faith in nature to be able to respond to, as you say, if you've got localized inputs, you know, and being able to harvest some of those from the healthiest plants that are around, and observing that, you know, these plants are incredibly healthy, then why wouldn't we be trying to emulate some of the microorganisms in that situation? It just, you know, that bringing out that concept of terroir that we sometimes leave only to grapes and now into cannabis, but understand that terroir has so much more to do with all plants that we're growing, and we can really pride ourselves on that, especially if we're using the right genetics, right? And I think that's the other thing that we have to remember, where we're in there is the whole movement going back to heirloom seeds, and you know, finding importance in that. It's not just because we want to romanticize the purple tomato. It's also important to recognize that those heirloom plants have a better association with microbes in the soil. That's something that has not been bred out of them. And so with that, there's always that increased opportunity to really tap into those relationships that they have with microbes, that newer varieties, and perhaps varieties that have been cultivated and or conventionally bred not in a living soil environment, don't have those relationships, right? And so we're you know, important to be able to bring back some of those genetics so we can really truly tap into the potential of what terroir can bring.
Oh, I think you hit the nail on the head. I personally like to use the word Appalachia. I think that that's a better description of your microclimate. From what I understand, there's a lot of controversy as whether terroir is the influence of the farmer, The Appalachia is the influence of the environment in which the farmer is working. But whatever, just to throw it out there, like, don't hate on us for using words in a manner that we believe is appropriate. But I think that you touched on something that a lot of people don't know is called biointelligence. So anything grown in situ, in nature, will naturally grow an intelligence for that environment. A prime example is basically evolution. You can see through time, geological time, that certain species of plants become very successful in this environment, and then they start to evolve to become a greater asset to that environment. And that's all done through what we want to call endophytic biology. So the endophytes are living organisms, fungi or bacteria, within the plant structure itself. And when that plant dies, they go back to being a terrestrial biological constituent. So there's that constant taking back and forth of that lesson that plant learned this year is being taught to the biology that's going to be part of that plant the next year. So you're so right about having biointelligent, heirloom, whatever you want to call it, seed stock to begin with, because it's going to do better. And you're right. You're going to the potential to unlock the genetic potential is way greater in that application than when you just take something that's been bred in, but not in a natural environment. Like, for instance, synthetically grown plants. I think that there's places for all of them, but if you take a biointelligent seed and you throw it into a salt grow, it's not going to do well, and vice versa. You take a seed that was generated in the salt grow and you throw it in the soil, you're not going to have good luck. It's going to take, I believe it's 7 generations is what I was taught for that seed to learn how to really take advantage of their environment.
Right. Yeah. Which I think one of the challenges of not having that bred back into our plants, now whether they've been conventionally bred to in a more synthetic manner, it'd be important to have them go through that 7 generations, especially if we're starting as an industry. Whether it's the food industry or specifically, plant medicine. If we want to turn towards using more biopesticides, especially those that come from bacteria and fungi, if the plants don't have that biointelligence, if it's been bred out of them, or they're not going to respond to those biopesticides, whether we're using Bovarias or Bacillus as our treatment for any of those diseases, they're not going to have that response mechanism because microbes are foreign to them to some degree. And so if we want to go towards a more natural way of addressing some of our plant pathogens, it's going to be important that those plants have those relationships with the rhizosphere, have the relationship of taking on endophytes as well.
Agreed, 100%. And just to prove to the audience that the relationship with biology in any plant has a huge impact on its primary, secondary, tertiary metabolites, the things we're looking for. So we did 200 acres of corn last year. There was no nitrogen used, no herbicides used. No pesticides whatsoever. At the end, he had a slight increase in yield. The savings was tremendous over nitrogen and pesticides. The most interesting thing is I finally have documented the increase in minerals, protein, energy, fats, the reduction of water. So in this feed corn, the reduction of water was 15%. So that means that this particular piece of corn could be fed 15% less of that corn is needed to feed that animal because it doesn't have the water in it. So it's more powerful. So, that's a huge advantage. And I just can't wait till at some point somebody does this with cannabis side by side with nitrogen, with biology, so that we can actually prove that living soils do provide a much higher level of cannabinoids as well as terpenes and cannabinols, because that's going to be the game changer. And again, you can use biology with salts. I know Elaine's fucking hating on me right now for saying that. But you can do it. The problem is you have to constantly use more biology because you're losing it.
Yeah.
But you're going to get the expressions that you're looking for.
Yeah.
So,
well, and I mean, I don't know if Elaine would be totally opposed to, using biology, and especially when you were referring to the muncher and the decompositional consortia that has been generated by Mo. In my opinion, I think that is a great use. Something that I would recommend a lot of growers to do as their fall management, right? So you putting your bed to sleep, feed them with some good foods, whether that's humic acid, fulvic acid, fish food or something going into the winter, but feed it with a spray of that decomposition stuff to break down everything in your soil bed, and perhaps grab some of those soluble nutrients that might be there, and that would be I could see Elaine getting around that, and essentially immobilizing nutrients in biology, but just huge opportunities for that type of consortium.
Agreed, 100%. And it's ironic that we're talking about Elaine. I just texted her yesterday. She's in freaking Sri Lanka right now.
Okay. Yeah. Hopefully fighting glyphosate.
She is an animal. I mean, for her to be keeping this pace at this age is just amazing. She is just an incredible trooper, and she's coming back this weekend. So hopefully we'll get a chance to catch up sometime next week. But yeah, she's still doing the work, man. She is a trooper. So, and in honesty, when I first started doing the work down at Rodale, that was the one thing that she was like, whatever you do, Leighton, don't ever play with biology and fertilizer. So what do you think I did? Yeah. Of course, right? Yeah. But what was interesting was that I realized that a certain amount of that soluble nutrient got tied up in the biology, just like you said. So for these guys to put their beds to winter, why wouldn't you want to grab anything that would wash out in spring when the rains come? And
as you mentioned it, that you don't have to be a salt farmer or ionic, chemical fertilizer. Organic farmers have the same, right? They can have a lot of soluble nutrients or plant available nutrients that may get in like the rains that you've had in Cali. Definitely, you're going to have some losses there. And if you can do a good fall cleanup, fall immobilization of those nutrients, that's something that organic farmers can do as well.
Yeah. So a buddy of mine called today. You know how the universe works, right? And he's like, Leighton, you're not going to believe this, but I'm back up in Ventura. And I'm like, oh, great. I missed you. How have you been? Blah, blah, blah. He goes, hey, by the way, I got to tell you, my oranges are so much sweeter. Like, this biology stuff is really, it really works. It's crazy. And I'm like, yeah, I know. I know. It's okay. He goes, but my avocado leaf tips are burned. Like, I over fertilized them.
Right.
And he goes, I don't know what I did. I haven't fertilized them in 2 years. I'm like, well, don't worry. That's what we call, organic nutrients that were locked up became available because we had all that rain. He goes, well, what do you mean? I go, well, look, when the rain comes down, the biology increases. We know it goes through the roof, the bacteria, when they get exposed to water. So they're the ones that are breaking down the organic form of the NPK that was built up in your soil. So that's why your leaf tips are burning. But don't worry, that's going to go away. The plants are fine. They're just burning up an old stock of fertilizers that you used from who knows how many years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's interesting that you say that, because that's always been a concern. Like, when I apply biology, people are like, oh my God, isn't it going to kill my plants because you're going to release everything at once? And I'm like, no, it's the opposite. It's going to tie up your excess nutrients. It's going to put things back into balance. You're not going to have nutrient lock. Don't worry about, the release. It's not. This is the opposite of the release. Although in some cases, like what happened to him, there are certain releases that do happen. But for the most part, that's kind of unusual.
Mm-hmm.
I do have a question for you. So with these beds or these cannabis growers, are most of them outdoor or are they indoor?
Most of them, the ones we're working with, we're trying to indoor.
Okay. So,
hey, brother, they're in Canada. We can't do a lot outdoors. It's winter up here,
What was the politically correct wording or phrases you use? So instead of calling it a soilless mix, what did you call it?
Low tension soil.
Low tension soils. Right. Yes. Yeah. That was the an appropriate term. Low tension soils.
Yeah, it's funny. I never thought that soilless medium would be an insult.
Well, yeah, we were trying to differentiate from those that are just using peat perlite or peat cocoa perlite as opposed to the living soil where there's compost and minerals and so on.
Got you. Well, I'll be more careful to
low
use
tension. Great.
Low tension soils. So back to putting a bed to sleep. I've always encouraged people that have built the horizontal system in their tents that even though they go to growing outdoors in the summer, that they should never shut the bed down. In other words, at least throw some plants in there, cover crop. I don't care what. Keep the light on low, water, just a little bit here and again. You don't have to get crazy, but keep the root system intact for the next grow, because otherwise you're starting up again. Whereas you could just plug into a thriving living bed. So that might be something you might want to think about instead of encouraging.
And of course, we know that here in north of the 49th, some of our beds are definitely, some of our fields have incredible biological activity in December, but less so in January and February, March, right? So we'll encourage the use of cover crops, whether they are things that will survive the winter or just kind of tie up nutrients going into the winter. But I also believe in if we are allowing rest, it is perhaps resting the soil, but it's not rest in the sense that everything's sleeping. It's yes, using a dead mulch, whether it's straw, leaves, but I also believe in feeding. So if you think of it in the sense that you do not have the roots there to keep all that biology happy, then you might consider throwing down some alfalfa meal, throwing down maybe a more complex sugar than molasses, but something that is a food source for microbes going over the potentially 4 to 5 months where there is no actual growth happening in the soil.
No, I think that's a great suggestion. Absolutely great suggestion. And something else interesting for the outdoor growers up there in Canada is that Elaine did a study back, I don't know how long ago, back years and years and years ago, where she went out to a field in, I believe it was Minnesota, the middle of the winter, and dug down through the snow, which was in her story was like 4 feet deep. Might have only been 2, but you know how we'd love to tell a good story.
I've been in Minnesota. It's probably 4.
Anyway, she found that there was this layer between the bottom of the snow and the frozen ground that was aqueous. And when she captured the liquid and put it under the microscope, it was essentially an inoculant. It was so powerful. And the theory is that because of the incredible density of the biology, that the heat transfer, what's it called? Kinetic energy of all of those organisms being in one place, which was what was preventing it from freezing. So I went on to theorize a little bit more, that perhaps that is the way nature jump starts spring. So when the ground thaws, all of that aqueous superpopulated layer just drifts right down into the ground as the frost recedes back and essentially charges it. So I think that in some ways nature knows way more than we do and is way better at dealing with life on this planet. Provides things like that do pretty much what we would try to do. So, again, the outdoor guys don't have to worry about this, but the beds, I think you're right. I think either providing, well, definitely a ground cover of some kind, whether it's hay or chips or whatever. But yeah, adding a little bit of alfalfa meal or some other food source for them to, overwinter would be a really, really good suggestion for these guys. And that's not going to kill them financially.
No, I mean, it might also help in creating a more disease suppressive soil as well, in that you are able to break down more material. You've got active microbes. They're going to break down potentially pathogenic or organic material that could be a nice overwintering host for pathogens. So the more you can break that down, creating a more disease suppressive soil might be a real benefit. And then hopefully you can kickstart here. Oftentimes in we're not going to get our cannabis plants out in the fields or any other vegetables, usually not till the end of May. If you can get in there early enough, you could get a nice cover crop, right? Something that April, May is actively growing because there are a good flush of nutrients that the overwintering has provided, and you jumpstart on that.
Yeah, agreed. That makes all the sense in the world. And, I don't know how like a grass would do up there, but the only problem with all the grasses is that when you go to plant your little hemp plant or your little, cannabis plant or THC plant, whatever you want to call them, the grass would outcompete them. And so that would be problematic. Whereas the prairies, they don't really die. They have a die back, but everything gets blown down, but as soon as that sun comes out, the grass just comes right back up through the bottom. So
one of our best cover crops, if you could get it, if you're harvesting your crops before sort of the end of, probably by early October, if you can harvest most of your crops by early October, if you can get down some fall rye. Kind of the beauty of fall rye is that in most areas in Canada, it will get to the swollen boot stage by early May, and at that time, if you were to mow down, it's essentially less competitive, right? You'll be able to mow it down sometimes, or of course at Rodale they had the roller crimper method. That type of method would be a nice way of having a dying mulch that you could transplant a nice cannabis plant into.
Oh, I'm a huge proponent of crimp roll. The ability to provide nutrient, protect the soil from UV, wind, and drying out. The fact that it's a natural herbicide, because nothing else can grow up through it. It's a win-win-win across the boards. Not to mention it's a biological food. So if your clients can do that method, you're talking, a grand slam home run all the way. And
I noticed one of the listeners, Brian, has mentioned that he plants, or I shouldn't assume that, but that they're planting winter rye, fall rye. Which I think I'd like to know where Brian's from. That'd be interesting.
Brian, if you can, just let us, chime in about where you're living, or what state or country you're in. But yeah,
see, we're jumping around on topics, but I thought it was really interesting where you'd mentioned that in the aquaponic study that once again it was not it was many different species. Right in the backyard of Rodale.
That's right.
Yeah. But you know, because one of our licensed producers of cannabis, they do aquaponics, but they also have living soil. So it's not necessarily a true dual root zone system, but they use a living soil and they use living water. One of the interesting things that they found in their work is that, and they typically will pass all their microbials, but they will always have lowest microbial levels in the soils that they have treated with living water as well. So
interesting.
There's something about the living water that even either produces other endophytes that the plants take up, or just produces a healthier plant that seems to reduce microbial contaminants. So
I think that's going to be an interesting statement when we have Dennis from Maine on, because he's really been getting into studying the water. So yeah, I think that's going to be great. Now, Brian did have a question earlier. I was going to wait till the end, but maybe we'll tackle it right now. When we were talking about seeds, is that including with diverse biology? When you were talking about seeds earlier.
Absolutely. So one of the guests that we'll definitely have on in the future will be, of course, Dr. David White. He's the endophytic, or he's the gentleman that really brought endophytes to the front of the table here. And he talks about seed coatings. And the last time we had him on a show, we were talking specifically about how best to protect the seeds for the cannabis plant for the following season. And I believe it was he that suggested that you don't take the seed out of the bud, that you actually leave the seeds in the bud until you're ready to actually plant them. That being because they're being protected by the flower itself. If you ever looked at the seed production, there's like this little sheath that goes around the seed that when you pop it, you're popping it out of that little sheath. And so the idea is that you're supporting the endophytes on the coating, the seed coating, which is really important. And I think that his biggest point was that for the most part in this industry, people are so worried about protecting the seeds that they're actually degrading the ability of that seed to have that interaction with the endophytes that are as part of the coating as well as inside the seed itself. So there's some real value to what's on the outside of the seed. It's as important as what the endophytes that are in the seed. So that might be something that hopefully you understand, Brian, because it's a really, really important trick that I thought was a great.
It was actually Hunt. I got the name wrong. Sorry, Hunt.
Yeah, and I think that makes a lot of evolutionary sense for those plants that don't explode their seeds, mm-hmm. right? Because for that, and honestly, I've never seen a cannabis plant regenerate. So I've never had a cannabis plant seed itself out, right? We always typically would harvest it, right? So it'd be interesting to know when does that cannabis plant shed its seed in nature?
I would tend to think that it would happen in decomposition of the flower around it.
Yeah, so it doesn't. The seed doesn't fall out over winter.
I don't believe so. I may be wrong, and it might be cultivar specific. I mean, I would tend to believe it would be cultivar specific, but mm-hmm. But that being said, we don't have as many landrace cultivars as we used to, obviously. So it's been changed, epigenetically changed. So what used to be probably isn't what's going on today. But I mean, if you've ever found a bag seed, you know, you probably experienced the fact that when you open it up, there was the skin that was still like part of the flower that was visible when the seed came out of it. Yeah. So I think evolutionary strategy was that particular sheath, kind of like a corn, was protecting the inners. In corn's case, it would have been the fruit, but in this case, it would be the seed itself. So it does make a lot of sense.
Yeah. No, I think it. Yeah, everything just opens up so many more questions in terms of.
That's what's fun about these conversations.
And that's why I'm sitting in the background learning, because I'm learning so much from you guys, right? Like I love this. That's why I like sitting in the background, because I could just intently listen.
I would love to know more what other people do in terms of seed germination, because it's very common practice to take your seeds and try to increase imbibition by throwing them in, soaking them overnight, right? So soak your whatever pepper seeds, tomato seeds, cannabis seeds for 8-12 hours. Then you do either the paper towel germination or pop them right into into a mix. But is that the best approach? It'd be interesting. Did you say it was David White or James White?
James White. I'm sorry, I did say James.
It would be interesting. Yeah, but you still look young in that picture. So I'd be interested to know if James White would advocate soaking of seeds prior to germination.
Well, we did talk about that on the show. We did talk about it, but again, I think that it really depends on what you're doing. Like, as long as it's not a big pH shift, so like an alkaline or an acid, I wouldn't see how it would affect the endophytic bacteria on the outside of the coating. But again, we will have him, and Ken take a note that was an important question that we need to ask him about, whether he recommends this type of behavior, or whether he recommends just like what I tell people, put it under your tongue. There has been some proof that you are epigenetically steering the plant toward your needs. Wow. That has been validated. Maybe not to everybody's liking, but for sure to many of the people that are what I want to call more organic, regeneratively focused in their life and their spirituality. My
daughter will suck every seed that she plants. Yeah,
beautiful. Now, where did she learn that from?
That might be intuitive for her, because that I would be the one who'd be putting in a little bit of kelp extract and a little bit of compost tea or a little bit of EM in when I soak my seeds, and then look at this. Hillbilly Herb is spitting into those seeds. I think that's phenomenal. That's probably hopefully intuitive.
Yeah. And again, it's amazing how much our intuition could help us if we took the time to actually listen to it and respect it. I don't know about you, but every time I didn't listen to a gut feeling, boy, did I regret it.
Yeah. No,
that's great. I have a question, guys. Now, considering that the biology inside the seed is coming from the mother plant, when you try it, you're putting it in the paper method, and you're letting it pop out in that instead of popping the biology out into the soil. Could you actually be losing something by doing it in that methodology?
I would say yes.
And I'd be really nervous of which paper towel I was using as well, right? Because you could be using one that has excessive bleaches or other things that in fact may be killing some of the bacteria that's on that seed coat as well. So I think all of that. Once again, great questions that would be loved. It'd be amazing if we could figure out which species are on each seed coat, which species survive, which species become endophytes, and which species are just there for root protectants and stuff. So.
And it's an interesting topic because it's not plant pathology, because you're talking about like almost a midwife. So somebody that studies the beginnings of a plant, not the plant itself or the end result of the plant. So it may be a speciality that really isn't mainstream or available. It's kind of like soil biology was 12 years ago. Nobody understood it. No one, Elaine was out preaching it. People were starting to get it, but that she'd been preaching that for 20 years before she got any traction. But I don't know, Ken, in your spare time, which I know you've got tremendous amounts of it, maybe you can research plant pathology, and is there an infant phase to it? Somebody that studies the transition from seed production to seed start.
Well, I know you did have somebody on, probably a year and a half or maybe even 2 years ago on the Living Soil Conversations, where she was germinating seeds in compost to see how the seeds would react. And that's where I actually learned that the biology was inside of the seed. And she was having really good results germinating in the compost because of the biology that was already in existence was matching up with the seeds. But I'll go back and I'll see if I can reach out to that young lady and see if we can get her on to see where she's at with that research.
That would be fantastic. Thanks, Ken. And I can speak to this too. When next week we have Jimmy Perkins on, which you're going to love this kid. He's a ball of energy. The reason I mentioned that is because there's a course that we put together for people to cost effectively, affordably learn how to create complete compost at home. Mm-hmm. And one of the methods that I use to really get the compost heavily biologically active is through cover crops and plants. So Elaine told me, way back when, you've got to keep your compost covered with a tarp. You don't want excess rain to get in it. You don't want it to go anaerobic. You don't want any weeds getting near it. You got to knock back the weeds, cut them back, pull them, whatever you got to do. And to me, after listening to her lecture a number of times and sitting around chopping it up, I went the opposite direction. I was like, no, Elaine, I'm going to cover crop my compost piles. And I did it. And as a matter of fact, this is a great story where she brought in all of her proteges from all over the country to do a workshop with her for the summer. Yeah. And she was teaching them how to compost in a manner similar to Johnson Sioux. There's the circles, the cages. Yeah. And none of her kids could get a really high, biocomplete compost when they were finished. So the second round, I said, hey, Leighton, can I compete with the kids to see, if I can make this? And she's like, sure, Leighton, go ahead. So I went up and I built this method that we call the eco pile. Mm-hmm. And I seeded it over, and I would go around and pull little plants, that were around the area and plant them as well, seedling trees, you name it, anything I could get my hands on, along with the diverse cover crops. And when it came time to test our piles again, she looked at everybody's, everyone brought her a sample. She put it on the microscope, and she basically was like yelling at them again, saying, hey, you guys, come on, man, you're my proteges. What is wrong with you? Why can't you make biocomplete compost in this manner? And then she looked at mine and was like, you guys, he's doing it and you're not? What is this? He has not been trained in this. And then she looked at me and said, well, how did you do this? I said, I cheated it. Like, I built this eco pile instead of, piling it up in a cylinder. And I explained why, I used a rotten log, which helped hold the water. I used branches, hays, all my greens and browns, and then cover cropped it. And those cover crops just built miles of rhizosphere, so that when I stripped it, guess what I got? All of the biology that was in the rhizosphere. So it's
was Is your pile a static pile essentially?
Yeah, no turn.
No turn.
No turn. Build it and forget about it. And
Right.
generally speaking, I would build one in fall for my spring applications, and then I'd build one in spring for my fall applications. So basically, the pile would be there for about 6 months. But I've accomplished the high levels of biology in anywhere from 30 to 45 days. I can start harvesting.
Right.
But the longer you let it go, the more the roots, the more the biology, the more everything. So, and again, we'll talk about this at length next week when we have perks.
Yeah. Now, did you measure temperatures in the pile over time?
Yes, I always had a compost thermometer in at all times. And my goal was, and it took me a couple of times to build it because I didn't want to get over 120. As soon as you get over 120 degrees, you're losing diversity and losing it really, really quickly. Like the difference between 120 and 121, catastrophic. And then you just get to 130 and now you're purely thermophytes. Everything is gone. And that's why it takes so long for it to come back. And
now, would you see any cover crop roots getting into? Do you know if you would have any roots growing close to the thermophilic areas?
So this gets back into thermodynamics. So in a cylinder, right, a column, you'll have a what I want to call a core. So the core is this hot ball, and the way you find the core is you take your compost thermometer and start sliding it down into the cylinder until you see the temperature just start to rise up real quick. And then as you push it down, you'll see it get hotter and hotter, and then it starts to go the other way and cool down until you outside of the core. Right. So just understanding the thermodynamics of a thermophilic pile is really, really important, because if you stick your thermometer in a little bit, you're not going to get a true reading. If you punch it all the way through the core, you're also not going to get a decent reading. So, that's why it's really important when you are building a thermophilic pile that you turn it a lot, because you're going to get hot spots and you're going to get cool spots. And if you don't turn it, you're not going to kill the pathogens throughout the whole pile, right? So there's a methodology behind, turning, and we call turn and burn. So heating it up, turn it, or heating it up, turn it. So again, that's why I went the opposite direction to what I want to call cold composting method. Again, I'm not putting in manures. I'm not using high nitrogens. I'm just using greens and browns only. And often I would inoculate it with the pile that I made last time. So I would liquefy what I made last time and spray it or inject it onto the pile after I built it. And then I would monitor it with the temperature. As soon as I saw the temperature turn, like I would see it go up to maybe 115. And then I'd get nervous as shit, because you can't turn one of these piles. You'll see when you watch the video. Yep. And then once I got 115 and I saw it start to cool back down, as soon as I saw that temperature turn and go the other way, I would throw seed on it. And if I threw seed on it too quickly, I would see that the seeds would grow, but they would yellow out. Like they were starving, because there was still nitrogen being consumed by the thermophytes in the pile. But once I got to that point where I noticed that the needle started really retracting quickly, I knew I could throw the seeds on it. And because they were in a thermophilic or warm pile, man, did they pop. Those seeds would pop and the plants would grow like crazy. So again, you're using nature to work with what you're trying to accomplish. You're not fighting it.
I think Ecological Project here has a good point on what plants would you recommend for that methodology, Leighton?
So no, you don't have to worry about plants getting hot. Again, I like diverse green manures. So you're going to probably get 12 to 15 different types of cover crops, but don't hesitate. Like I would often go out, you guys, to the most hostile environments, like a crack in the road. And if there was a plant there, I would dig that plant up and plant it on my pile. The reason why is because if it can survive there, I want horizontal gene transfer. I want my other plants in my pile to have the same genetic potential, to have that extra strength, the Hercules gene that's allowed that plant to survive road salt being driven over, excess groundwater running down it. I mean, that plant gets the shit kicked out of it. So those were some of the other techniques that I did. And a lot of times I would plant on an axis. So I would plant it facing east-west. So one side of the pile was the north side and one side of the pile was the south side. On the south side, I tended to produce a lot of more bacterially dominant plants. And on the back side of the pile, I would go out and steal a bunch of acorns, which is another trick. The acorns, when they're warm, they'll pop. They'll pop really quick. So I'd get all kinds of oak saplings. I would also get some evergreen saplings and plant, a foot, 2 feet tall. Dig them up and bring them over and put them right in that pile because I knew it was going to be there for 6 months. So, I gave it as much diversity as I can, but don't stress about heat tolerance because you already know you're going down. Again, I'd plant probably when I'd see temperatures like 100, 105, 90, I would throw as much seed as I could at that point. But I never planted. When I did plant at 115, I would see that the plants that did pop were yellow. They weren't really healthy. I mean, eventually most of them shook it off, but other times I would have dieback. So really, I think the sweet spot is, right when you see that temperature threshold crossing 100, now's the time to plant the heck out.
If you had, whether it's like PVC pipes with holes, could you stab those into that type of pile just to drop the temperature?
So that's the beauty of this pile. Is what I did was I try to visualize this. I'd get an old rotten log and I'd lay it down on the axis, east-west. Then I'd go to all the local deciduous trees that were like 5, 6, 7, 8 feet tall, and I'd cut the branches so that they were about 3 to 4 feet long with all the leaves on them. Then I crisscross stack those like a tent. Right, so some of the leaves are up on the branch on the log, and other leaves are down on the ground. So I stitched it together. So it created like a tent. Then I'd layer hay on top of that. Then I'd start mixing my greens and browns, throw them on top, then mix another layer of hay, water, repeat. And so what I did was built a thermodynamic pile because the pile could pull in cool air from the bottom into that tunnel and expel the heat through the top. And the more heat that came out the top, the more cool air got pulled in under the bottom. So it helps to regulate excess heat. It helps to pull in more oxygen for the biology, expel the CO2 and the heat that was being built up by the thermophytes. So essentially, it's the same concept as the
hugelkultur.
It's the same as the Johnson Sioux concept of creating chimneys for ventilation.
Sure.
And yes, you're absolutely right, Ken. It is typical or traditionally like a hugelkultur type of system. Now, the one big mistake that most people do when they build hugelkultur is they dig a hole. They didn't dig a hole, man. They built the pile on top of the soil. And there was a reason why. They were smart. They knew if they digged a hole and they disturbed that soil profile, if it rained, guess what? That thing was going to fill up like a friggin' cauldron and everything was going to go anaerobic. So they would lay logs on the soil and then they would build soil on top of the logs. Then they'd plant it. And that's a huge misconception in the industry. I don't know how many times people hit me up about, I'm building hugelkulturs. How deep do I go? No, on top, not underneath. That's why it's called a pile, not a sunken bed. But anyway, yeah. So I don't know if I answered the question or if I was just wondering.
Yeah, well, and ecological projects makes comment around PVC, and it's great the fact that using PVC pipe, and I know that a lot of industrial composters will often use that to instead of having wood at the bottom, just to force air through it. But traditional knowledge systems often using bamboo to another way of tracking air and stuff. So,
and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that after that pile gets going in Johnson Sioux's methodology, he pulls those pipes out. I don't think he leaves them in there.
Correct. Within about 7 days. Actually, I think he's doing it in the videos I've watched. I think after about 2 to 3 days, the biology has stitched together with their glomalin, and you can pull that out, and the hole stays in. So yeah, you're not supposed to leave the pipes in.
So there you go.
Yeah.
And again, I think, if I'm not mistaken, and I'm pretty sure I'm not, that the whole reason he came up with that methodology was his wife was sick of him coming home smelling like shit.
Yeah, because he started with cow manure.
Yeah, pure manure. Yeah. So that's where that methodology accelerates, because it really does get that manure to break down even faster. Unfortunately, you're wasting all of the nitrogen. You're gassing it off in an ammoniacal or methane form, which is bad. In the future, as I get more time to experiment and play with it, I did a alpha beta, and I was getting ready for my final test, where I used rock dust and mineral powders to arrest the thermophilic process in GOM. So GOM is ground up organic matter. And out here, the trucks never stop rolling. And it could be palm trees, it can be hay, it can be grass clippings, it can be trees, prunings, you name it. I mean, and it's just no chance of getting any kind of browns to green relationship. It's just whatever comes in gets thrown on the grinder. The grindings go into a pile, and they just keep going and going and going. So unfortunately, the nitrogen level on GOM is through the roof. I mean, this shit goes hyperthermophilic. So these guys hired me to help them create a fungally dominant compost. I'm like, no, what you mean to say is a biocomplete compost, not a fungally dominant. So stop using that buzzword, people. They wanted this, and I'm like, well, I can't do it with GOM, because no matter what I do to GOM, it just heats back up. As soon as you pile it up, it heats. So forget it. I'd have to make greens and brown relationship. And they're like, no, we don't have time for that. You got to use this. So I'm like, all right, well, the only thing I can think of is powder coating the actual ground up organic matter, so that the thermophytes can't continue to do what they're doing, which is to break off carbon, break off nitrogen, release CO2, release ammonia, release methane. And to be honest, it worked. So I did that, and demonstrated that with a half yard, no, I think it was a full yard pile here at my residence. And then went on to make a 15-yard pile at their facility. And we were going to then move into a 100-yard pile, and some politics got involved. And so I basically walked away from that, and I'm glad I did. I ended up in a new home, Peach Hill Soils, where he has the same process. There's GOM, but I have also access to all kinds of different waste streams, including spent mushroom substrate, core that's being used to grow vertical microgreens in LA, all organically. I got wood chip fines, kiln dried fines, you name it, anything I want to play with. Whereas in Agrimin, I was only going to be focused on GOM. So this was again the universe hard at work. So at some point in the future, I'll get back on that chain, that bandwagon.
The rock dust. Are we thinking of just is this like basalt, granite rock dust, or what?
So actually, that's a great question. So where I started with the rock dust was it was from a development near here, and I'd noticed that it had some unique qualities to it. So I actually had it sent off for a malic 3, so a really, really strong acid, to see what the content was. And interestingly enough, it had a lot of calcium in it. So it had calcium, magnesium.
Calcium in what? Do you know if it was calcium carbonate, or because to me that would lead to a lot of ammonification.
Right.
Yeah.
So biodynamics, right? Rudolf Steiner, that guy was so far ahead of his time, it's not funny. And And people think he's a whack job because he got into talking about fairies and ethereal forces, but he didn't have the microscope to understand that what he was talking about was these biological, or more importantly, biogeochemical reactions that were happening. Now, in one of his lectures, and it's very difficult to listen to because of his accent, but bottom line is that
or to understand German.
Yeah, right. But the lecture I heard must have been translated, and the translator sucked. Like, it was really, really hard to listen. But he made an association, a relationship between calcium and nitrogen that has yet to be explored any further. Kind of like Tesla's work, right? Tesla did some fucking badass shit that is basically, we're not even allowed to friggin' go there anymore. But bottom line is that there's some kind of relationship with calcium turning into nitrogen or bonding with nitrogen or something. And I witnessed it. I flat out witnessed it. Those piles did not smell bad. Like, I put the mineral powders in there. I mixed them all together. I stabbed it with a thermometer. It heated up a little bit, and then it shut down. And I'd stick my hand in there, and I did this side by side with a pile of GOM untreated, right? I'd stick my hand into this pile of the treated one, and I smelled it, and it actually smelled faintly like a forest. Didn't smell like really good compost when you pull it out and you go, oh, it's like forest. I call it forest binge drinking, because you just, it smells so good. You just want more and more of it. It had that effervescence of forest floor, but it did not heat up. And you stick your hand into the next pile, burn your fucking hand, pull it out, it smells like ammonia. So what was it? I don't know. I have not had time. I still have all the test data, so I can go back and revisit it.
Like, I mean, we would never recommend a hot compost pile and adding limestone to that,
right?
Because you would volatilize most of your nitrogen. Much of your nitrogen would go off as ammonia, right?
That's what makes sense. That's where your mind goes. But that's where mine,
and I could be totally wrong on that. I'd love to get some comments on that, but that's typically why I would never mix manures with lime, because I think I'm going to lose a lot of the nitrogen. So, well,
let me ask you this: did you ever, as a kid growing up, use an outhouse?
Yeah.
Okay, so what was the first thing you did after you did your business?
Well, we dumped sawdust or whatever it was.
A couple limes?
Yeah. See, I don't. Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Lime kept the odor down.
Yeah.
Right. So lime neutralized the odor. What was the odor?
Methane. Ammonia, usually, right? Or what's that? Methane or ammonia?
Methane, ammonia. Yeah, it stunk. Right. So there is something. I don't have all the answers, but I highly suggest anybody listening play with this. You do it at home. Get a bag of fucking lime and make a compost pile and super hot, and then add some lime to it and watch what happens. Now, if you add,
you're the professor. Maybe you should be doing this experiment with your students and give us the data on this, brother. Come on.
Of course, we do this with ferments, right? So when I'm doing a fermented leaf material, we'll add bone meal to try to take some of the odor away. But yeah, I'll definitely get back to you next week on my worry would be, of course, adding the calcium carbonate. Are we creating a reaction where we're producing a lot more NH4?
All right. So and the other thing that is really important to know, when I did the experiment, the interesting result was that the nitrogen that was in the control pile was 0.5. The nitrogen in the pile that I used, the rock dust, was 4. It was a 4-to-1 when I was done.
Wow.
So I made an organic fertilizer. Yeah. Now I fucked up the pH pH was at about 9, I believe. But we know biology can handle or tolerate up to about 10 before it really shuts down. Now, my plan was moving forward was to use some kind of organic acid to help bring the pH back into balance before the product shipped. So in this case, I was going to be using lemons. We have a tremendous amount of lemons out here, and they take them and they crush them up and squeeze them for the juice, and then the rinds go to the landfill. So I could have taken the rinds, ground them up, and blended them into the pile to get the pH back to a more appropriate range. But the other thing too was I never got to the point of adding biology, because I'm pretty sure the biology would have buffered it too. And then there's the quality of this muncher juice. Really interesting app. One of the tests came back that showed that it buffered everything. If I had really low bacteria and I applied this, it brought bacteria up into a really good range for predators. If I had super high biology, so like almost anaerobic or excess moisture content, and I put the muncher juice on, it brought it back to center again. And the same with the pH. For some reason, this shit like neutralizes stuff and puts it, it's a buffer. It's a buffer. And again, I've got to do a ton more work on this. This was just the alpha test. Now we got to get into the weeds with this a little bit more. So, that was one of the reasons why I retired from our show on Thursdays, was because I have so much work. I have so many things I want to work on, that was killing me. I mean, I'd lose the whole day Thursday because I couldn't do anything in the morning. It's just there wasn't enough time because we started at 10. And by the time we got done, it was often 1:30, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm fucking emotionally fried. And I don't know about you, dude, but when I'm expelling a lot of energy and knowledge, I burn out. It's called emotional exhaustion or psychological or using your brain too much. So I was junk at the end of the day. So I'd basically lose my whole Thursdays. And when Ken and Lil tag team me, you knuckleheads, convinced me that I'm still important and need to be on fucking air.
Oh, me? I'm such a sweet, innocent man. It was the wife, okay? Believe me, it was the wife.
Clearly not in the room. Clearly not in the room. They convinced me that I should continue to support the community and the industry, as the plant industry as a whole. So here I am on at least this is Friday afternoon. I was able to work all morning, and now I'll burn myself up at 4 o'clock, and I'll take Poe for a walk and come home and pour a scotch, smoke some weed, and call it a day. And get up tomorrow and do it again. But at least this time slot does not, I don't lose a whole day. And plus, it's great to have a like-minded, educational-minded person as a co-host.
So I'm gonna be leaving thinking I've got more questions than I had, shared information. So my weekend's now shot because I'll be figuring all these things out. So.
I apologize to your wife, Av. Okay, I do. I apologize to your wife.
Yeah, well, yeah, I may have to cut some of these days short because it's 7:30 here on a Friday night, so it's already Scotch time.
Well, I appreciate the fact that you've committed to this, Av. I know it's a lot when you have you're married and have a family and friends that you want to be with, and it's 2 hours. It's a chunk of time, man. And so big ups and thank you for.
This definitely, and I appreciate those who tuned in because it really does. The knowledge sharing is just going to be phenomenal for whether you're growing cannabis or growing your crops, growing your food or your medicine.
Yep, and we're going to be releasing so much information over 2023. The stuff that we did with Kyle was just a preliminary. We just scratched the surface, and now that he has the confidence to leave the crack, the nitrogen, the phosphorus, and calcium or potassium. Now that he's strong enough that he knows he can grow successfully without using NPK, we're going to do a whole bunch of more stuff, and I think that the most valuable information that will come out of this will be that nutritional piece, like just how much more nutrition is in this corn than traditionally grown synthetic.
Yeah, and this is where those that beat up on Billy Albrecht, they probably have never read his papers, but when you produce that nutrient dense corn, it's not all about just the increased milk production of that cow, but it's also that health of the calf that she's produced, and so on and so forth. And that's some of the work that happened if you read the Albrecht papers. All three of those papers, you recognize that it's beyond just looking at one single crop, but the overall effect of how that translates to, yes, milk production, but also calf health.
And let's face it, to consumer, whoever consumes it, whether it's the cow, whether it's a human, whether it's another animal that's drinking the milk, so that you're going to kill that and eat that. So it goes right up the friggin' line, man.
Yeah.
Right up the whole line. And then soil health. Hello. Soil health means clean drinking water. Hello.
Yeah, and especially in these times of climate chaos, right? We just don't know what next year is going to be, and so the more robust we can make our ecosystems,
the more they buffer, right? The more abuse, the more extreme weather they can handle. That was another thing that was really interesting on Kyle's work, was his corn stalks were thicker. He had, traditionally you get 1 ear of corn per stalk. Did you know that, Av? Most people don't. Most people think there's like 5 ears, right? No. The corn plant only gives you 1 ear. Sometimes you'll get a little baby ear next to it, but it's generally 1 ear of corn per plant. Well, guess what he got? 3 and 4 ears.
Yeah.
From one application of fish brew. So you're epigenetically encouraging that potential. So this year, when we do all of the minerals, all of the whole thing, because we have time to get ready. Last year, he called me 2 weeks before he was planting, freaking out that he couldn't afford the nitrogen because of the Ukrainian war. He was panicked. He had to do something. And we'd been working for 1.5 years. So he'd listened to enough of my podcasts. He's like, oh, this guy kind of knows his shit. So I really don't have a choice. Let's try going, biologically. And he did. And he was extremely successful. And again, we'll have him on the show. We'll review the data for people before spring so they have time to prepare themselves. So he'll probably be on within the month for sure. I mean, we already got a few people lined up. We got Perky lined up. We got Madam Cannoli lined up. Ken, who was the other person that we had lined up?
Oh, I'm drawing a total blank like you are now. And we talked about it before the show.
Yeah.
Perky.
Was it your irrigation specialist?
Oh, Alex.
Yeah.
And there's another one still. There was another one that you brought up. So there's the first month gone. Dennis
from Maine.
Correct. So Dennis from Maine, and then after him, we'll get Kyle on, and that should be in. Well, it's getting close to. Well, no, they don't plant till May, so that'll be in March. So stay tuned, audience, because we're going to really line you with some highly qualified speakers as well as some knowledge bombs.
And Silly Lily is saying the Muncher guys. We got to get them on.
Too. All right, but hey, start plugging this shit in, Ken. Hurry up.
Okay, I'm on it.
No weekend for you.
Weekend? What the hell's that? It's 7 days a week. We do have a couple of questions if you guys want to tackle them. Like, I don't know when you guys want to finish up for the day. How much longer have you want to stay on before the wife is going to come at you with a baseball bat?
Yeah. No, I got a few more minutes. Yeah. Thanks.
All right. So Av, generally speaking, do you want to do an hour and a half, and that gives you like a hard stop?
That could be a marriage saver. Yeah.
All right. So, today we'll wrap up with questions and stuff and give it a break. And in the future, I'll plan to stay on for the 2 hours with the guest, and Av, you can cut off after an hour and a half or an hour, whatever you need to protect your investment with your wife.
Yeah, we don't want any baseball bats, unless they're rubber ones, Nerf ones. So we'll start with this one. For seed storage, what is the best method for seed storage?
Well, I'm gonna stick my neck out there and say a traditional method. It's called a root cellar. All right. So ambient temperature, 65, 68, 70, whatever it is for you in your area. And do not take them out of the bud. Do not take them out of the sheath. Now, dry the bud like you would traditionally and cure the bud like you would traditionally. That's not going to affect the seeds. Excess gas in the bottle could affect the seed. So make sure you're burping. Again, just cure it like you normally would. That was what I gathered, or what I took away from that conversation with James White when we did get into seed coatings and endophytes in seeds.
So with the skin.
Yeah. So again, if you're going to de-seed if you're growing cannabis for seed, then you have these machines. They turn and they pull everything out. So it's basically the same as like popping that little seed out of its sheath. Leave it alone. Just leave it in the bud. Just don't even touch it. Again, you have to dry and cure properly, or you will kill the seed. But if you follow that method, you are mimicking what nature probably would have done.
And then if you're burping, you're not worrying about mold or fungus. I keep cutting you off, brother. Sorry. So go ahead.
No. Yeah, I'm very intrigued by that methodology, and I'd love to talk to other seed keepers to know if anyone practices a more traditional way of keeping that seed. Definitely the more commercial way of keeping seed is oftentimes you can keep if it's been dehulled and you're going to keep it at sort of like 4 degrees Celsius, which is what 10. What would that be? I'm not good with my Fahrenheit.
4 degrees Celsius would be 21, 22 degrees Fahrenheit.
No, because it's 0 is freezing.
Sorry. 33, 34 degrees.
Okay.
No,
and then,
I think it's 1 Celsius to 4 degrees. So
I'm looking at 32 Fahrenheit is 0 Celsius.
Yes, plus 16.
So,
plus 16 would be 40.
39?
48.
48? Okay. So
no, because 50 is 10 degrees Celsius.
Is it?
Yeah, I'm looking at it. I'm looking right at thermometer right here.
You tell us what it is.
But 4 degrees Celsius is typically what a lot of seed keepers might keep it at, and then of course those that would freeze, put their seeds in the freezer, which is
and that's
fine.
what I do.
You're not bringing your seeds in and out. Every time you bring in seeds out of the freezer, you're of course probably changing the humidity or increasing the humidity. That excess moisture may cause those seeds to get that moisture and then freeze and break out. So, but those are the traditional ways. And I mean, I say traditional, those are the conventional ways. Traditionally, we do see, thanks, Brian. Yeah, which most fridges are probably set at around 40 Fahrenheit, 4 degrees Celsius. And then I think a lot of people still use clay jars, right? Because they take in that excess humidity. They'll
breathe.
They breathe, right? So that always works as well. But very intrigued to see and talk to seed keepers around.
I wonder what they're doing, because there's that big, huge seed bank, I think over in Switzerland or something, in the salt mine. I'm wondering what the temperature in there would be. That's that, global seed saving thing.
Well, remember, the deeper you go, the hotter it gets. Not the coldest.
Yeah. So the one in Norway, is that?
Yeah, Norway. That's it.
That's all kept at below zero. It's all in a frozen.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so we'll jump to the last question, and we were talking about odd houses and what you're putting in, and I know that Labs is used for controlling odors, and so Hillbilly Herb was Labs for the odd house.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. Yeah.
Labs are a wonderful bacterium that we have just begun to understand all of their abilities, both in hostile environments as well as aerobic environments. They're really I'd almost be willing to throw them into like the Archaea family, because of their ability to go both anaerobic, aerobic, and still function. They're a very tough and diverse species. Species.
Yeah. No question. I mean, one of the main interests along waste management companies is that's effective microorganisms have definitely had a big role with waste management companies for odor elimination of outhouses, right? So just going in there with your EM, spraying your outhouse, spraying your clothes, whatever you've got the odors on, does a great job. So I think there's a lot of merit to that.
Oh, agreed, 100%. And the other piece of that is the calcium, right? So now you got a win-win. You're using calcium, you're using EMs, you're locking up nitrogen, making it available for the microbes before it goes gaseous. It's just a win-win across the boards.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, guys, that's it for questions. So
I'm off to go do some homework now around calcium and in compost piles.
So Al,
don't send me any more homework, please. Okay.
That's right. I love some really hard papers.
Yeah, I loved that paper. I wanted to thank you for that. Unfortunately, we didn't get to that today, but maybe in one of the future episodes, we'll have some time to chop up that conversation. And Av, if you do have any seed producers, please encourage them to try this. It's too late this year, obviously, but if they're growing next season, just do a side by side. It can't hurt. One jar is waste a lot of time or energy.
Right. Great.
Hey, anything to raise the bar, right? Anything to help the community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And of course, it'd be great to be having people like James White who might be able to take this to the next level and look at what microbes you have on the dehulled one versus the hulled one, and then of course it'd be great to know which ones actually become endophytic based on what's on each one. So
all right, so he's the next one on the list, Ken. So put him at the. All right, we got a month and a half of shows already.
Yeah.
I love you guys. Okay, you're killing me here. You're killing me.
That's our job, man.
Well, since you suggested him, you get to reach out to him. Okay.
Oh no, I'm all over him. I'll send him an email right now. As soon as we're after the show, I'll get on it. Just I need the date because you got the calendar. So give me the date, and I will get him locked in.
Okay, I will do that. And if you have anyone you want to bring on, I'll be sending you a link later on that you can pick and book these guys, because this is fantastic, gentlemen. And I love you for the information and the passion that you guys have that you're bringing to the community. Thank you very much for your time, and the people that have been in the chat. Share this out with your friends, guys. We need more people in the live chat and watching these shows. So don't hesitate to share them out. With that, guys, do you have anything coming up that I know you've got the Grow Up coming to Alberta, where Leighton and I'm going to be there as well. Do you have anything else coming up that people can check out?
Well, of course, if anyone's hanging around San Diego, the Emerald Conference is the March 1st to the 3rd. They can check that out. I hope to be at that as well, but that's looking quite nice. And yeah, but anyone who's coming up to Edmonton, Leighton's going to be up there. We're dragging him up to the north. So.
And Poe.
And Poe. And it's not going to be winter time, so he's not going to freeze his ass off.
Wow. Well, we'll try to get some sheep ready for him.
No, just find some hazardous waste sites. We'll come and identify it for free for you.
So, Leighton, do you have anything coming up, brother?
Work, eat, and sleep, bro. I got a million things to get done. And I don't know as I'll be able to take March 1st off, March 1st through 3rd, to come down to San Diego. And unfortunately, it's like 4 hours plus away. But I'll see. You never know. If things roll and yeah, I get the time, I will.
Fantastic. Okay, guys. And of course, for me, the Passion Within shows, we've actually got Jordan Smeltzer coming back on. She wanted to rebook and come back in and share some more information. I've got some people coming on that are going to be talking about financing, because numbers isn't something that we learned in high school. So we've got some people coming on for that. We just had a hypnotherapist on. So there's so much information and so many passionate people. We got Tommy Trichomes coming on here in a little while as well. So this is the channel that we're going to be putting everything on. So share this channel out. Don't subscribe to my personal YouTube channel. Subscribe to this one. Tell everybody this is where it's going to be at. So share it out, guys. We love you all. And with that, my friends, I'm going to end the broadcast.
Thank you, everybody. Peace out.